The photograph wasn't supposed to exist. My dead husband young and laughing his arm around a woman who wasn't me. A woman with red hair catching the Carmel sunlight, her smile unguarded in a way I'd never seen Robert smile in our 42 years together. I found it tucked behind a false panel in the cottage bookshelf, the cottage he'd secretly bought 4 years before his death, the cottage I'd discovered only after my son threw me out on my 68th birthday, calling me a useless old woman. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you want to know how a garage key unlocked not just vintage cars worth millions, but a family secret that would shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and inheritance, stay with me. And if this story moves you, please like and subscribe. There are more secrets yet to uncover, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The attorney's office smelled of leather and old money, the kind of place where fortunes changed hands with the whisper of paper and the scratch of expensive pens. I sat in a chair that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, my hands folded in my lap while Mr. Hoffman adjusted his glasses and prepared to read my husband's will. 3 weeks. Robert had been gone only 3 weeks, and already I felt like a stranger in my own life. Before I begin, Hoffman said, his voice carrying that particular tone attorneys use when they're about to deliver bad news disguised as legal necessity. I want to assure you that everything here is legally binding and precisely as Mr. Campbell instructed. Beside me, Jonathan shifted in his tailored suit. My son, 43 years old, successful in commercial real estate, and wearing the same expression he'd had since childhood when anticipating a gift restrained excitement poorly masked by solemnity. I should have recognized Hoffman's statement as the warning it was. The reading passed in a blur of legal terminology, but certain phrases cut through the fog of my grief with devastating clarity. To my son, Jonathan Campbell, I leave our penthouse residence in Los Angeles valued at approximately $4 million, along with my primary investment portfolio currently valued at $3.2 million. I watched Jonathan's face. His jaw tightened, but he nodded, accepting what he clearly viewed as his due. And to my beloved wife, Susan Campbell. I leaned forward slightly, expecting to hear about our shared savings, perhaps the small cabin in Big Sur we'd talked about retiring to. I leave the property located at 1420 Industrial Parkway, the garage and its contents. Silence filled the room like water rushing into a sinking ship. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice sounding distant and thin. "Did you say a garage?" Hoffman's expression held something I couldn't quite read, pity perhaps, or discomfort. "Yes, Mrs. Campbell. A commercial garage property in the industrial district, approximately 2,000 square feet. Jonathan's hand found my shoulder, squeezing slightly too hard. "Don't worry, Mom," he murmured loud enough for Hoffman to hear. "I'll make sure you're taken care of." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like hands pushing me underwater. 42 years of marriage. 42 years of making Robert's coffee exactly how he liked it, of listening to his stories about vintage cars and architecture, of building a life together in the city we both loved. And he'd left me a garage. I barely heard the rest of the reading. Something about the property being fully paid utilities, current a key waiting for me at Hoffman's office. Jonathan received detailed instructions about managing his portfolio contacts for financial advisors. A letter from Robert about stewardship and responsibility. For me, there was only a key and an address I'd never heard of. Mrs. Campbell, Hoffman extended a small manila envelope across his mahogany desk. The property key and documentation. I took it with numb fingers. Through the envelope, I could feel the shape of a single key, old-fashioned and heavy. "If you have any questions about the property," Hoffman continued, "I'm afraid I can't be of much help. Your husband was quite private about this particular asset. He handled all arrangements personally." Outside Los Angeles spread beneath us in a glittering sprawl of afternoon sunlight and smog. Jonathan walked me to his car, his hand on my elbow as if I were fragile, breakable. "I don't understand," I said as he opened the passenger door. "Why would Robert do this?" Jonathan's face, so much like his father's in structure, but lacking Robert's warmth, settled into an expression I'd seen increasingly over the past decade. The look he wore when explaining complex real estate deals to people he considered less sophisticated. "Dad was old school, Mom. He probably thought I should inherit the valuable assets since I know how to manage them. The garage is just, I don't know. Maybe he had sentimental attachment to it. You know how he was about cars." But I didn't know. That was becoming horrifyingly clear. Robert had loved cars the way most men his age loved golf or fishing, as a topic of conversation, a source of nostalgia. We'd owned sensible vehicles, a Camry, a Lexus in our better years. Never anything that would require a private garage. Where am I supposed to live? The question escaped before I could stop it, raw and small. Jonathan pulled into traffic, his eyes on the road. Well, the penthouse is mine now. It's in the will. He paused, and I heard him choose his next words carefully. I'm sure we can work something out. Maybe Aunt Helen has room, or there are some nice senior communities. Senior communities. I repeated the words flatly. Independent living facilities, he corrected as if the euphemism made it better. You'd have your own apartment activities, people your own age. People my own age. I was 68, not 90. I still hiked. I volunteered at the library. I'd been planning to travel now that Robert's health issues had resolved, except they'd resolved by his death, not his recovery. The penthouse, our penthouse, the home Robert and I had shared for 15 years, rose before us all glass and steel and carefully cultivated prestige. Jonathan pulled into the underground garage, parking in Robert's assigned spot with an ease that suggested he'd already claimed it as his own. I'll help you get your things together, he said, pocketing his keys. I have meetings tomorrow, so it would be best if you could clear out anything personal tonight. I stared at him. Tonight, Mom? His tone sharpened with impatience. The penthouse is mine now. I need to start making changes, and I can't do that with all your stuff everywhere. Your stuff. As if our life together, Robert's and mine, was just clutter to be removed. I followed him into the elevator, watching the numbers climb to the 32nd floor. The ride felt longer than usual, each ascending floor marking my distance from the ground, from stability, from everything I'd thought was certain. The penthouse opened before us, unchanged, yet utterly transformed by context. The furniture Robert and I had chosen together, the photographs from our travels, the throw pillows I'd selected last month, thinking we'd have years more to enjoy them. All of it now belonged to my son, who was already measuring spaces with his eyes mentally redecorating. I've got boxes in the study, Jonathan said, heading down the hallway. Take whatever's personal to you. The furniture stays. I'll be having designers in next week anyway. I stood in the living room, surrounded by 42 years of accumulated life, and tried to determine what was personal. The coffee table Robert had refinished himself, the painting we'd bought in Santa Fe, the small ceramic bowl that held my reading glasses. How do you dismantle a marriage in a single evening? I started in the bedroom, folding clothes with mechanical precision. Robert's clothes still hung in his closet, and I couldn't bring myself to disturb them. Jonathan could deal with that. Let him box up his father's sweaters and shoes, let him feel the weight of erasing someone from the world. At the back of my closet, I found Robert's old messenger bag, the leather worn soft with age. He'd used it for years before switching to a briefcase, and I'd kept it out of sentiment. Inside, I found a sealed envelope with my name written in Robert's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Susan, if you're finding this, it means I'm gone and you've come back to the penthouse for your things. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I'm sorry for the confusion and pain my will has caused. But please, before you judge my choices, go to the garage. Everything will make sense there. Trust me, one more time. All my love. Robert, I read the note 3 times, searching for hidden meaning in the familiar loops and slants of his handwriting. The garage. He wanted me to go to the garage. Mom! Jonathan appeared in the doorway. How's it going? I need the bedroom cleared by morning. The designers want measurements. Something in me crystallized, then hardening from liquid grief into solid anger. I'm leaving now, I said, standing. I'd packed one suitcase with closed toiletries, a few photographs. Everything else could wait or burn for all I cared. Okay, good. Jonathan checked his watch. So you'll stay with Aunt Helen? I'll figure it out. His eyes narrowed slightly. Mom, don't be dramatic. I'm just trying to move forward like Dad would have wanted. You're just a useless old woman, Mom, I said quietly, and watched his face flush. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that. Wait, I hadn't said that. He had. The words had come from Jonathan's mouth an hour ago downstairs in the garage when I'd asked if we could at least wait a few days before I moved out. I'd been so shocked I'd almost convinced myself I'd misheard. But looking at his face, now defensive, irritated with no trace of remorse, I knew I'd heard correctly. I'll be gone in 5 minutes, I said, pulling my suitcase toward the door. Mom, wait. Goodbye, Jonathan. I didn't look back. The industrial district looked different at night. Warehouses loomed against the dark sky, their windows empty eyes watching my old Camry navigate streets I'd never driven before. The GPS on my phone directed me with dispassionate efficiency. In 500 feet, turn right. Your destination is on the left. 1420 Industrial Parkway was exactly as unpromising as I'd imagined. A low, single-story building with a rolling metal door, the kind of place you'd expect to find abandoned tools and oil stains. Graffiti tagged one corner. A chain-link fence surrounded what might have once been a parking area. I sat in my car for a long moment, the key from Hoffman's envelope heavy in my hand. This was what my husband thought I deserved. This was what 42 years of marriage had earned me. The anger I'd felt in the penthouse drained away, leaving only exhaustion and a grief so profound it felt like drowning. But Robert's note had said to come here, to trust him one more time. I got out of the car. The night air carried the smell of motor oil and decades of accumulated dust. The key fit into the padlock with surprising smoothness, as if recently maintained. The lock opened with a soft click that seemed too loud in the empty street. I pulled the rolling door up, expecting darkness and disappointment. Instead, lights flickered on automatically, revealing an interior that made no sense. The space before me wasn't an abandoned garage. It was a sanctuary. Recessed LED lighting illuminated custom flooring climate control panels and 3 vehicles arranged with museum-quality precision. Each car was covered with a fitted cloth cover, but even hidden their shape suggested elegance, value, purpose. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the controlled silence. The first cover came away in my hands like silk, revealing a 1964 Aston Martin DB5 in pristine silver birch. The same model Sean Connery drove in those James Bond films Robert had loved. The car gleamed under the lights as if it had just rolled off the factory floor, chrome details catching and scattering brightness like scattered stars. "Robert," I whispered, "what did you do?" The second car, when uncovered, was a 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. Its distinctive doors and elegant lines were unmistakable even to my untrained eye. Deep blue paintwork, immaculate chrome leather interior that looked untouched by time. The third made my breath catch a 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB4 deep red, like the wine Robert would order on our anniversaries. A small plaque beside it detailed its provenance, its rarity, its significance. These weren't just cars. These were masterpieces. Each vehicle had a leather portfolio beside it containing documentation, purchase agreements, maintenance records. I opened the Aston Martin's portfolio with shaking hands. Purchase price $1.2 million. Current estimated value $4.8 million. The Mercedes $1.5 million purchase, $2 million current value. The Ferrari $900,000 purchase, $3.1 million current value. I sank onto a leather bench against the wall, my legs no longer capable of supporting me. $13 million, conservative estimate. My husband had left me $13 million in vintage cars while making it appear he'd given me nothing. But why? Why the secrecy? Why make me think I'd been cast aside? That's when I saw the envelope taped to the wall beside a light switch panel. My name in Robert's handwriting, and beneath it in smaller letters. "Read this first, my love." My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. "My dearest Susan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've discovered what I've come to think of as my final gift to you. First, I need to say I'm sorry for the shock and confusion you must be feeling right now. The secrecy wasn't meant to hurt you, but to protect what I was building for your future. 6 years ago, when I received my diagnosis, the one I told you was manageable, the one I downplayed every time you asked about my doctor visits, the cardiologist gave me 5 years at best. I beat their timeline by a year, but I knew our time together was limited, and I needed to ensure you would be taken care of after I was gone." I stopped reading, tears blurring the words. 6 years. He'd known for 6 years and never told me the full truth. 6 years of stolen time of plans made in secret of a future he was preparing for me to face alone. I know you're wondering about the will, about why I would leave our home to Jonathan instead of to you. Believe me, this decision caused me more sleepless nights than my failing heart ever did. Over the past decade, I've watched our son change. The ambitious boy we raised has become something different, something harder and more calculating than I ever wanted him to be. The truth is, I feared what would happen to you if I left everything to both of you jointly, or even split equally. Jonathan would have found ways to control the assets to manage your portion for your benefit, as he would say. I've seen how he speaks to you when he thinks I'm not listening, how he dismisses your opinions and needs. I've watched him become someone who values appearance over substance status, over compassion. So I created this split inheritance with very deliberate intentions. Jonathan has received what he will see as the valuable portion, the penthouse, the visible investments, the status symbols. But what you're looking at now, my love, is the real wealth. These 3 cars alone are worth approximately $13 million. The documentation will confirm their provenance, and you'll find contact information for Marcus Weatherby, my trusted dealer and advisor for these acquisitions. He can help you with whatever you decide to do with them. But the cars are just the beginning. In the safe behind the photograph of us in Venice combination is our anniversary month and day. You'll find documentation for several investment properties I've acquired over the past 6 years. All are placed in a living trust that transferred to your name upon my death. You'll also find banking information for accounts that should provide you with comfortable income for the rest of your life. I looked up from the letter, searching the walls. There, a framed photograph of Robert and me on the Rialto Bridge, laughing as a street musician serenaded us during our 35th anniversary trip. I stood on unsteady legs and approached the photograph. Behind it, set into the wall, was a small safe. I entered our anniversary 0614. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, a thick portfolio waited. The label read, Estate of Robert Campbell, Complete Asset Inventory for Susan Campbell. I opened it, scanning columns of numbers and property descriptions that made my ears ring. Apartment building, Seattle, current value, $8.2 million. Commercial property, Chicago, current value, $6.7 million. Vineyard, Northern California, current value, $4.3 million. Stock portfolio, various holdings. Current value, $12.8 million. Bond holdings, current value, $3.2 million. Private equity investments, current value, $5.1 million. The total at the bottom of the page, $53.3 million. $53 million, not including the cars. I had to sit down again before I fell down. With numb fingers, I returned to Robert's letter. I know this is overwhelming, and I'm sorry for keeping all of this from you. At first, it was just a project to channel my anxiety about the future. But as the portfolio grew, I realized that revealing it prematurely might put it at risk. If Jonathan discovered the extent of these holdings while I was still alive, he would have found ways to involve himself, to offer his expertise, to gradually take control. By the time I died, he would have positioned himself as essential to managing it all. You're probably wondering why I didn't simply protect you through more conventional means, a straightforward trust, a clear will that left you the majority. The truth is, I wanted to give Jonathan a chance to show his true character. Perhaps faced with his inheritance and responsibility for you, he would rise to become the man we raised him to be. Perhaps he would prove my concerns wrong. But if he has revealed a different nature, if he has been dismissive of your needs, if he has shown more concern for his convenience than your welfare, then this legacy is your protection against that reality, your independence, your freedom. I've always believed that character reveals itself most clearly at moments of inheritance, both what we receive and what we believe we deserve. Jonathan is receiving a test as much as an inheritance, and you, my love, are receiving the means to live the remainder of your life exactly as you choose, beholden to no one. There's one more thing I need to tell you, and it's the hardest part of this letter. It's about a choice I made long ago before I met you, and the consequence I've been managing ever since. I once loved another woman. Her name was Elena, and we were young and foolish together in Carmel before I moved to Los Angeles, before I became the man you knew. I thought we would marry. I thought I knew what love was. But Elena struggled with addiction pills first, then harder things. I tried to help her, spent everything I had trying to save her. But she disappeared one day, and I thought that chapter of my life was closed. Then a year later, she found me. She was pregnant. She wanted me to know the baby was mine, but she didn't want anything from me. She was clean, she said, and she was giving the baby up for adoption. She just thought I should know I had a child in the world. That child was Jonathan. I adopted him legally a month after he was born. Elena relapsed badly after giving birth, and the adoption agency contacted me as the biological father. I was 26, unprepared, terrified. But he was mine, and I couldn't abandon him. A year later, I met you. Beautiful, kind, steady you. You accepted Jonathan as if he were your own blood, never making him feel like anything other than your son. You gave him gave us the family we needed. I never told you about Elena because I was ashamed. Ashamed of my past, of my poor judgment of the mess I'd created before I was wise enough to do better. But Elena never fully disappeared from my life. Over the years, she would surface occasionally, a phone call from a hospital, a letter from a rehab facility. She struggled her whole life with the demons that had claimed her so young, and I helped her when I could, anonymously through channels she wouldn't recognize. 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. She's in a care facility in Carmel now, the place where we first met all those decades ago. I've been paying for her care through an anonymous trust. I'm telling you this now because the trust transfers to your control upon my death. You'll find the details in the portfolio. She doesn't know I'm the one who's been helping her, and she doesn't know about Jonathan. I never told her I raised her son. The adoption was closed, and I thought it kinder to let her believe he went to a family who could give him everything I couldn't provide alone. You have a choice to make, Susan. You can continue the support, redirect it, or end it entirely. Elena is 68 now, the same age as you. She has no other family, no other resources. Her care costs approximately $8,000 monthly. I know this is a burden to place on you along with everything else, but I couldn't bear the thought of Elena suffering even after I'm gone. She was my first love, but you were my true love, my partner, my home, my heart for 42 years. I was never unfaithful to you, Susan, but I did keep this secret, and I understand if you can't forgive that. There's a photograph in the safe, the only one I kept. It's from before, from when Elena and I were young. I kept it to remember who I was before I became the man you deserved. Whatever you decide about Elena, know that my love for you was never diminished by what came before. You were my choice every day for 42 years. All my love now and always, Robert. I sat in the silent garage, surrounded by millions of dollars in automotive art and real estate holdings, holding a letter that had just rewritten my entire marriage. Jonathan wasn't my biological son. Elena, the red-haired woman in a photograph I hadn't yet seen, was his birth mother, and Robert had been supporting her secretly for 40 years. I reached into the safe with shaking hands and found the photograph tucked beneath the financial documents. Robert, impossibly young, his arm around a woman with red hair catching the sunlight. Her smile was unguarded, her eyes bright with something that might have been love, or might have been the manic energy that comes before a fall. They stood on a beach I recognized, Carmel, where the cypress trees met the Pacific. The photograph was dated on the back, May 1977. 1 year before I met Robert. 2 years before Jonathan was born. I turned the photo over and over in my hands, trying to reconcile this young man with the husband I'd buried 3 weeks ago, trying to understand how he'd carried this secret for our entire marriage. Was I angry, hurt, betrayed? I didn't know. I felt too much and too little all at once, as if my emotional circuitry had overloaded and shut down. One thing I knew: I couldn't stay in this garage tonight. I needed space to think, to process, to decide what to do with all of this impossible information. I looked at the portfolio from the safe. On top was a deed to a property in Carmel, 2847 Cypress Lane, Carmel by the Sea, California. A house. Robert had bought me a house in Carmel. In the margins, in his handwriting, "This is your home now if you want it. Fully furnished, ready for you. Go there first, decide the rest later." I gathered the essential documents, the deed, the banking information, the contact number for Marcus Weatherby. I left the cars under their covers, locked the garage behind me, and drove north into the night. Carmel was 2 hours away. I had a lifetime of questions and no one left to answer them. But I had a key to a house I'd never seen, and a photograph of a woman whose life had somehow become entangled with mine across 4 decades. As I drove up Highway 1, the Pacific Ocean, black and vast on my left, I thought about inheritance, about what we're given and what we earn, about secrets kept for love and secrets kept from shame. Robert had left me wealth beyond imagining, yes, but he'd also left me a choice about Elena, about Jonathan, about what kind of person I wanted to be with this power. The useless old woman my son had dismissed was gone, dissolved in the revelation of the garage and the letter, but who I would become in her place that remained to be seen. Dawn broke over Carmel by the Sea as my GPS guided me down increasingly narrow streets lined with cypress and pine. 2847 Cypress Lane was a stone cottage partially hidden behind mature trees, their twisted branches creating a natural gate between the house and the world. I parked on the street, too exhausted to trust my judgment about driveways and private property. The past 12 hours felt like 12 years. The will reading Jonathan's cruelty, the garage. Robert's letter, the photograph of Elena. The key from the deed opened a Dutch door painted seafoam green. I stepped inside and stopped. Every detail looked chosen specifically for me. Built-in bookshelves surrounded a stone fireplace. Comfortable seating in the blues and creams I'd always preferred. Morning light poured through multi-paned windows, illuminating hardwood floors covered with hand-woven rugs in subtle patterns. I moved through the rooms in wonder. The kitchen was updated but traditional, with a breakfast nook overlooking a garden where roses were just beginning to bloom. A single-bedroom cozy, rather than large, opened onto a private patio with a glimpse of ocean between neighboring properties. But it was the small study off the living room that finally broke through my exhaustion. There, above a simple writing desk, hung a watercolor painting I recognized instantly, the Venice Canal where Robert had proposed, created by a street artist all those decades ago. We'd lost the original in a move years before. This was a perfect replica, as if Robert had commissioned it from my memory. I sank into the window seat cushioned in my favorite shade of blue and let the tears come. Not the desperate sobs of recent weeks, but a gentler release. Robert had created this space for me with such care, such attention to the things that would bring me comfort and joy. Even in death, he was caring for me in ways I was only beginning to understand. A soft knock at the door roused me from grief. Opening it, I found an elegant woman in her 70s standing on my doorstep, a covered dish in her hands. "Hello," she said warmly. "You must be Susan. I'm Margaret Winters, your neighbor 2 doors down. Robert asked me to keep an eye out for when you arrived." I stared at her. "You knew Robert?" She nodded, offering the dish. "He visited several times over the past few years preparing the cottage. I'm one of the few people who knew about his project. He made me promise not to reach out until you came to claim the place." Her eyes crinkled kindly. "It's just a simple casserole. I thought you might not want to worry about cooking your first day here." I accepted the dish, oddly touched by this continuation of Robert's care. "Would you like to come in?" Over tea in the kitchen, Margaret filled gaps in my understanding. "Robert was so meticulous about getting everything right," she explained. "He'd bring photos of your home in the city, trying to capture your aesthetic while creating something that belonged here in Carmel." "I had no idea he was doing any of this," I admitted. Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "He mentioned that. Said it was for your protection, though he didn't elaborate." She studied me with gentle directness. "He did say that when you finally came, you might need a friend. Someone who understood what it was to rebuild a life after loss. You've lost someone too." "My husband 8 years ago." She smiled softly. "It gets different, if not easier. Having good neighbors helps." When Margaret left, promising to introduce me to others in the community when I felt ready, I had a deeper appreciation for Robert's thoroughness. He hadn't just provided financial security and a physical home, he'd thought about my emotional and social needs as well. I spent the rest of that first day exploring the cottage more thoroughly. In the study desk, I found a folder containing practical information, names of local doctors, service providers, community resources, even a library membership already paid for in my name. And tucked into the back of the drawer, another envelope in Robert's handwriting, for when you're ready to understand about Elena. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The envelope went into my purse alongside the photograph, the letter from the garage, and all the questions I couldn't yet bear to answer. Instead, I unpacked my single suitcase, took a long shower in the bathroom's clawfoot tub, and slept for 14 hours in the bedroom's comfortable bed, lulled by the distant sound of waves. I'd been in Carmel for 2 weeks when Jonathan found me. I should have expected it. My son had always been tenacious when pursuing something he wanted, and the mystery of my whereabouts combined with growing suspicions about Robert's hidden assets would have driven him to hire investigators. I was pruning roses in the front garden when a luxury SUV with Jonathan's personalized plates pulled up to the cottage. He emerged, arms crossed expression, a mixture of triumph and accusation. "Found you?" he said as I approached. "Interesting place you've got here, Mom. When were you planning to mention it?" I kept my voice calm despite my racing pulse. "Hello, Jonathan. This is a surprise." "I bet it is." He glanced pointedly at the cottage. "Care to explain how you're suddenly a property owner in one of California's most expensive coastal towns?" I unlocked the door, gesturing him inside. No point in creating a scene for the neighbors. "I think you'd better come in." Jonathan followed his critical gaze, taking in every detail of the cottage interior. I could almost see him calculating its value, measuring its worth against his expectations. Charming. He said the word somehow rendered insulting by his tone. So this is why you've been dodging my calls. You've been hiding out in a secret vacation home. I haven't been hiding, Jonathan. I've been processing enormous changes and deciding how to move forward. I set my gardening gloves aside and faced him directly. How did you find this place? He smiled without warmth. I'm not completely incompetent, Mom. When you disappeared, I hired a private investigator. Basic welfare check on an elderly parent who vanished after showing signs of confusion following her husband's death. The calculated manipulation of his approach, casting me as potentially senile to justify invasive investigation, struck like a physical blow. I see, I said quietly. And this investigator tracked me here. After some effort, yes. The property records were interesting reading. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Apparently, Dad purchased this place 4 years ago but kept it out of his regular accounts, which made me wonder what else he might have hidden. My hands stilled on the kettle I'd been filling. He knew about the cottage. The question was how much he knew about everything else. Robert made his decisions about the will for his own reasons, I said carefully. The cottage was meant to be a surprise. Jonathan followed me into the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe. A surprise, he repeated flatly. Like that worthless garage in the industrial district, another one of Dad's surprises. My heart hammered painfully. The garage was part of his estate, yes. The garage where I saw vintage cars worth significantly more than the penthouse he left me. His jaw tightened. The penthouse that comes with maintenance fees I can barely afford since most of the liquid assets went into trust funds I can't access. So there it was. Jonathan had discovered the cars, or at least glimpsed them. The question was what he planned to do with that knowledge. Your father made his choices, Jonathan, I said, pouring water into the teapot. The penthouse and investment portfolio he left you are substantial gifts. Gifts, he scoffed. The penthouse needs hundreds of thousands in repairs that I discovered only after starting renovations. The investment portfolio barely covers my existing commitments. Meanwhile, you're living in a Carmel cottage and apparently own a collection of classic cars worth, $10,015,000. I poured tea into 2 cups, the familiar ritual steadying my nerves. What exactly do you want from me, Jonathan? The truth would be a start, he replied. Did you know about these secret assets all along? Were you and Dad planning this manipulation of the inheritance? No, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. I knew nothing about the cottage or the garage until after Robert died. I was as surprised as you are now. This admission seemed to catch him off guard. He took the offered teacup, studying me as if seeing a stranger. Then why keep it from me these past weeks? Why disappear instead of explaining? Because I needed time to understand it myself. I answered honestly. And because your behavior after the will reading didn't exactly invite confidence or collaboration. He flinched slightly, then recovered. I was upset. Finding out Dad had essentially disinherited me in favor of you. Disinherited you? I interrupted, disbelief coloring my voice. He left you a multi-million-dollar penthouse and investment accounts worth millions more. A fraction of what he apparently had hidden away. Jonathan's voice rose. Those cars alone are worth... How would you know their value, Jonathan? I challenged. Unless you've been investigating far more thoroughly than you're admitting. He had the grace to look momentarily abashed. I have contacts in the collector car world. Made some discreet inquiries based on what little I could see through the garage windows. Of course you did. I murmured, suddenly weary of the deception and counter-deception. We sat in uneasy silence, tea cooling between us. I studied my son's face, the familiar features that echoed Robert's yet somehow lacked the compassion that had always softened my husband's expression. Should I tell him? About Elena, about his birth mother still living just miles from where we sat. About the truth of his origins that Robert had kept hidden for 43 years. Before I could decide, Jonathan set down his cup with deliberate care. There's something else I need to know, he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar vulnerability. Dad's lawyer, Hoffman, he made a strange comment when I pressed him about additional assets. He said something about medical expenses that Robert had been covering for years, expenses that weren't for his own care. My heart stopped. He wouldn't elaborate, Jonathan continued, watching my face carefully. Said it was confidential, but I've been going through Dad's old files, the ones from his study. I found check registers going back decades. Payments to a care facility in Carmel, Carmel. Monthly payments of $8,000 to something called Cypress Grove Memory Care. The teacup shook in my hands. I set it down before I dropped it. Mom! Jonathan leaned forward, and for the first time since Robert's funeral, I saw genuine emotion break through his carefully maintained facade. Who was Dad paying for 40 years? Who was he supporting? I looked at my son. Not my biological son, but the child I'd raised from infancy. The boy I'd loved through scraped knees and teenage rebellion and adult estrangement. The man who'd called me useless and thrown me out of my home, yes, but also the child who'd once believed I could fix anything. He deserved the truth. But did he deserve it from me, or did he deserve the chance to discover it himself, the way Robert had apparently intended Jonathan? I said slowly. Before I answer that, I need you to answer something honestly. Why are you really here? Is it about the money, or is it about understanding your father? His jaw tightened. Can't it be both? It can. But which matters more? He stood abruptly pacing to the window overlooking the garden. I don't know anymore. I thought I understood Dad. I thought I understood what he valued, what he wanted for me. Then he dies and leaves this puzzle. And I feel like I never knew him at all. His voice cracked on the last words, and I glimpsed the lost child beneath the angry man. What if I told you, I said carefully, that there are answers to your questions, but getting them might change everything you think you know about yourself? Jonathan turned from the window. What does that mean? I stood reaching into my purse for the envelope Robert had left in the cottage desk, the one marked "For when you're ready to understand" about Elena. It means your father left something for us to find together, I said, holding the envelope. But once we open this, there's no going back to who we were an hour ago. Jonathan stared at the envelope, then at me. Is this about the woman in Carmel, the one he was paying for? Yes. Who is she? I took a breath, feeling the weight of 43 years of secrets pressing down. Her name is Elena Morales, and she's your birth mother. The color drained from Jonathan's face. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair. What? Your adopted Jonathan. Your father adopted you as an infant when your birth mother couldn't care for you. The words came faster now, a dam breaking. I met Robert a year later. We married, and I became your mother in every way that mattered. But biologically, Elena is your mother, and Robert has been supporting her care for decades. Jonathan's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. He looked like a man who'd just discovered gravity worked differently than he'd always believed. Why didn't you tell me? He finally managed. All these years. Because Robert wanted to protect you from pain he thought you didn't need to carry, I said gently. Elena struggled with addiction, with demons she couldn't overcome. He thought it kinder to let you believe you were ours, fully ours, without the complication of a birth mother who couldn't be part of your life. But she is part of my life. Jonathan's voice rose with something between anger and anguish. She's been there all along, hasn't she? In Carmel. How far away? About 2 miles from where we're sitting. He stood again, running his hands through his hair in a gesture so reminiscent of Robert that my heart ached. I need to see her. Now. Jonathan, wait. No. He turned to me with an intensity I'd rarely seen. You said there were answers in Carmel. You said opening this, he gestured to the envelope still in my hands, would change everything. Well, I'm ready to change. I'm ready to know the truth, all of it. No more secrets, no more protected ignorance. I want to meet my mother. I looked at him, really looked, and saw that the anger had burned away to reveal something raw and real beneath. Whatever came next, whoever Elena turned out to be in her diminished state, Jonathan needed this. We needed this. All right, I said, reaching for my phone. But we do this carefully and we do it together. Elena has Alzheimer's early onset. She may not understand who you are. She may not even remember having a son. Jonathan nodded, his face set with determination. I understand, but I still need to see her. I made the call. Cypress Grove Memory Care was exactly the kind of place Robert would have chosen, small, private, with an emphasis on dignity and comfort over institutional efficiency. The building was designed to look like a large coastal home, all weathered shingles and wide porches nestled among the cypress trees that gave it its name. The director, a woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, met us in the reception area. She was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 50, with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering, but somehow retained compassion. Mrs. Campbell, she said, shaking my hand. "I've been expecting you. When the estate transfer came through after your husband's passing, I wondered if you'd visit." "This is Jonathan," I said, watching Dr. Chen's face carefully. "He's Elena's son." Dr. Chen's expression shifted to understanding. "She talks about you sometimes in her clearer moments. Though she doesn't use your name, I don't think she ever knew it. She calls you mi hijo, my son." Jonathan's hand found the back of a chair, gripping it for support. "She knows I exist. She knows she had a child, yes. Whether she understands the passage of time or what became of you." Dr. Chen shook her head gently. "Alzheimer's is cruel in what it takes and what it leaves behind. Sometimes Elena is quite lucid, able to discuss her past with surprising clarity. Other times she's lost in moments from 50 years ago or convinced she's still a young woman." "Can we see her?" I asked. Dr. Chen studied us both. "Are you prepared for this? She may not recognize you. She may become agitated or confused. And I should warn you, Elena's addiction damaged her quite severely before she got clean in her 40s. She looks older than her years." "We understand," Jonathan said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "Please, I need to see her." We followed Dr. Chen through corridors designed to feel like home hallways, past residents in common areas engaged in art therapy and quiet conversation. The facility was beautiful, expensive, exactly the kind of care that Robert's anonymous $8,000 a month would provide. Elena's room was on the second floor with windows overlooking a garden. Dr. Chen knocked softly before entering. "Elena, you have visitors today." The woman sitting in the chair by the window turned, and I saw Jonathan's breath catch. Elena Morales was 72 but looked 80. Her red hair had faded to white, with only hints of its former copper worn in a simple braid over one shoulder. Her face was deeply lined, the kind of weathering that speaks of decades of hard living. But her eyes were the same shade of brown as Jonathan's, and when they focused on us, there was a spark of intelligence still present, despite the disease eating away at her mind. "Hello," she said, her voice tentative. Then, focusing on Jonathan, her expression shifted to wonder. Oh, you came back." "Elena," Dr. Chen said gently. "This is Jonathan Campbell, and this is Susan Campbell. They wanted to meet you." "Campbell?" Elena repeated, her brow furrowing. "Robert Campbell, is that... Are you Robert's boy?" Jonathan moved closer, his movements careful as if approaching something fragile that might shatter. "Yes. Robert was my father. He raised me. He was a good man," Elena said, her eyes filling with tears. "I knew he would be a good father, even when I couldn't, when the drugs..." She trailed off, confusion clouding her features. I stepped forward, kneeling beside her chair, so we were at eye level. "Elena, my name is Susan. I married Robert after Jonathan was born. I've been Jonathan's mother for 43 years. She looked at me, searching my face. "You took care of my baby." "Yes, I loved him as my own. I couldn't," she whispered, tears spilling over. "I wanted to, but I couldn't. The drugs were stronger than I was. Robert tried to help me, but I was too far gone. But you got clean eventually," I said gently, remembering details from the medical files I'd reviewed. "You've been clean for 30 years, Elena. That took tremendous strength." She shook her head. Too late for my boy." Jonathan sank into the chair opposite her, and I saw his own eyes were wet. "It's not too late. I'm here now." Elena reached out with a trembling hand, and Jonathan took it. They sat like that, mother and son meeting for the first time in conscious memory, while I watched from my place on the floor. "You look like him," Elena said after a long moment. "Like Robert when he was young, before I ruined everything." "You didn't ruin everything," Jonathan said, his voice thick. "You gave me life. Dad gave me a home. Susan gave me love. That's not nothing." "Robert sent pictures," Elena said, her focus sharpening as she accessed a clearer memory. "Years ago when you were small, the director gave them to me, 3 or 4 photographs of a little boy with dark hair and my eyes. I kept them until I forgot where I'd put them. But I remember you were smiling. You looked happy." "I was happy," Jonathan said. "I had a good childhood. Good parents." He glanced at me when he said it, and something in his expression had softened, shifted. Elena's attention drifted, her gaze moving to the window. "The ocean is very blue today. My mother used to take me to the beach when I was small before she died. Did I tell you my mother died?" "You did?" Dr. Chen said gently, stepping forward. "Elena, you're getting tired. Perhaps we should let you rest." But Elena's hand tightened on Jonathan's. "Don't go yet. I finally got to see you. Mihijo, my beautiful boy." "I won't go far," Jonathan promised. "I'm staying in Carmel. I'll come back and visit you if that's okay." "You'll come back?" Hope and disbelief warred in her voice. "I promise." Elena studied his face, then nodded slowly. "You have kind eyes, like Robert's. You'll be a good man." "I'm trying to be," Jonathan said quietly. We stayed another 20 minutes as Elena drifted between clarity and confusion, sometimes addressing Jonathan as her son, sometimes seeming to think he was Robert come back to her from the past. Finally exhausted, she fell asleep in her chair, and Dr. Chen gently suggested we let her rest. Outside in the parking lot, Jonathan stood beside his SUV without moving to get in. I waited, giving him space to process. "He did this for 40 years, he finally said. "Dad supported her for 40 years, kept her comfortable and cared for, and never told anyone. Never told me." "He was protecting you," I said, "and protecting her dignity. Elena didn't want you to know about her past. Robert honored that choice while making sure she was safe. And you," Jonathan turned to look at me, "you raised another woman's son never knowing where I came from, never demanding I be grateful or different or—" His voice broke. "And I repaid you by calling you useless and throwing you out of your home." I reached for his hand. "You were grieving. People say things they don't mean." "No." He pulled away, not in anger, but in self-recrimination. "No, that's too easy an excuse. I've been saying and doing hurtful things for years. Dad saw it. That's what his letter meant, wasn't it? That's why he structured the inheritance the way he did. He knew I'd become someone who valued the wrong things." "Jonathan, he was testing me." Jonathan's laugh was bitter. "And I failed spectacularly. Within hours of his funeral, I proved everything he feared about me was true. I wanted to comfort him, but he was right. Robert had indeed created a test, and Jonathan's immediate actions had confirmed rather than disproved his father's concerns." "So what happens now?" Jonathan asked after a long silence. "You have the money, the property, the control. I have a penthouse I can't afford to maintain, and a growing pile of debt. Do I get to know if I passed or failed Dad's final exam?" I thought about Robert's letter, about the discretion he'd given me regarding Jonathan's inheritance, about the choice that was now mine to make. "That depends," I said carefully, "on what you do next." Meaning your father's test wasn't just about your initial reaction. It was about growth, about whether you could recognize the path you were on and choose to change. Jonathan leaned against his car, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "I don't know how to change. I don't even know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I knew about Dad, about you, about myself, it's all different now." "Good," I said gently. "Sometimes we have to lose our old selves before we can become who we're meant to be." Philosophical wisdom from the mother I didn't appreciate. He smiled sadly. "I don't deserve your kindness, Mom." "Probably not," I agreed and saw surprise flicker across his face at my honesty. "But love isn't about deserving. Your father taught me that. He loved Elena enough to care for her despite everything she'd done. He loved you enough to try to teach you hard lessons even after death. And I loved you from the moment I first held you, before you'd done anything to deserve it." Jonathan's composure finally cracked. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around my son, not my biological son, but mine nonetheless, while he grieved for the father he'd misunderstood and the man he'd failed to become. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "For everything. For being cruel to you, for chasing money over what mattered, for becoming someone Dad couldn't trust." "I know," I said, holding him tighter. "I know." When he'd calmed enough to speak again, I stepped back and looked him in the eye. "Your father left me a choice, Jonathan, about whether to share these assets with you and under what conditions. I've made my decision." He wiped his eyes, bracing for judgment. "I'll help you," I said, "but not by simply giving you money. That wouldn't honor your father's intentions or help you become who you need to be." "What are you proposing?" "First, complete transparency. I need to see everything, all accounts, debts, contracts, commitments. No hidden liabilities or convenient omissions." He nodded. "Okay." Second, professional financial management going forward. You've demonstrated that your judgment in these matters is compromised by impulsivity and overconfidence. Any funds I provide will be structured through trusts with appropriate oversight. His jaw tightened, but he nodded again. I understand. Third, you continue to visit Elena. Get to know your birth mother, understand where you came from. Your father supported her financially, but she needs more than money. She needs family. I'd like that, he said quietly. And fourth, I paused, making sure he was listening. You work with a therapist on the underlying patterns that created this crisis, not as punishment, but as growth. Your father believed you could be better than your recent choices. I believe that too, but you have to do the work. Jonathan absorbed this, and I saw him wrestling with pride, shame, and a fragile hope. And if I do all this, he asked finally, if I accept these conditions and actually change, what then? Then we'll revisit the question of inheritance. Maybe in a year, maybe in 5 years. When you've demonstrated that you value relationships over transactions, substance over appearance. So I'm on probation. You're on a journey, I corrected. One your father started you on, and I'm continuing. Whether you see it as probation or opportunity is up to you. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the cypress trees surrounding the care facility where his birth mother slept. I'll do it, he said finally. All of it. Whatever it takes. Good. I touched his arm gently. Now go home to Los Angeles. Get your affairs in order. Find a good therapist. And when you're ready, come back to Carmel. We'll work through this together. As I watched him drive away, I felt the weight of decision-making settle on my shoulders. Robert had trusted me with this responsibility, had believed I could balance justice and mercy, consequences and grace. I hoped I was worthy of that trust. 2 weeks after Jonathan's visit, I finally opened the second envelope Robert had left in the cottage desk, the one marked for when you're ready to understand about Elena. I'd been avoiding it, afraid of what additional revelations it might contain. But after watching Jonathan meet his birth mother, after seeing the truth begin its healing work, despite the pain it caused, I knew I needed to understand the full story. I settled into the window seat with tea and evening light and broke the seal. Susan, if you're reading this, you've found Elena. You've learned about Jonathan's origins, and you've had to make decisions about the inheritance without full context. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for keeping so many secrets for so many years. I want to explain how Elena and I fell apart, and why I never told you the full truth. I met Elena in 1976 when I was 25 and she was 24. She was electric, brilliant, creative, completely alive in a way I'd never experienced. She was a photographer, and she saw the world in colors and compositions that made everything seem new. But she was also struggling with pain, physical pain from a car accident that had killed her mother and left Elena with chronic back injuries. The doctors prescribed pills. Within 2 years, she was addicted. I tried to save her. God, how I tried. I paid for rehab programs, moved her away from bad influences, stayed up nights while she went through withdrawal. But addiction is stronger than love, stronger than good intentions. She would get clean for weeks or months, then relapse harder than before. Then she disappeared. Just vanished one night, taking everything she could carry. I searched for her for months, hired private investigators, checked hospitals and shelters. Nothing. I moved to Los Angeles to escape the memories. Started my architecture practice. Tried to build a life without her. Then, 14 months after she'd disappeared, she called. She was 6 months pregnant. Clean, she said, living in a facility for pregnant women with addiction histories. The baby was mine. She'd gotten pregnant just before she left. She wanted me to know I was going to be a father, but she didn't want anything from me. I drove to Bakersfield the next day. Saw her with her belly swollen with our child, her eyes clear for the first time in years. She was really trying to be ready for motherhood. But 2 weeks after Jonathan was born, she relapsed. The stress of childbirth, the hormones, the weight of responsibility, it was too much. She was found unconscious in her room with Jonathan crying in his crib. The facility contacted me as the biological father. I adopted him legally at 4 weeks old. Elena signed the papers from rehab, crying the entire time. He deserves better than me, she told me. Promise me he'll never know how badly I failed him. Promise me he'll never have to carry the shame of who his mother really is. I promised. A year later, I met you at a gallery opening. You were looking at a photograph of the Carmel coastline, and you said it reminded you of healing. Something in those words and the way you saw beauty in broken places made me want to know you. On our third date, I told you I had a son from a previous relationship. You didn't flinch. You asked about him, what he liked, how old he was. You treated Jonathan's existence as a gift, not a complication. We were married 6 months later. You became Jonathan's mother in every way that mattered, and I told myself that the details of his birth mother didn't matter, that you didn't need to know about Elena or my failed attempts to save her. But Elena didn't disappear entirely. She would surface every few years, a phone call from a hospital, a letter asking for nothing but letting me know she was still alive. Sometimes clean, sometimes not. In 2018, 5 years ago now, she called with different news. Early onset Alzheimer's, diagnosed at 67, progressing rapidly. She was living on the streets in Carmel, the place where we'd met, trying to find something she could no longer remember. I couldn't leave her like that, Susan. Whatever she'd done, whatever she'd failed to be, she was Jonathan's mother, and she was suffering. I found Cypress Grove, paid for her admission, set up the anonymous trust to cover her care. She doesn't know it's me. She thinks it's some government program or charity. But I visit sometimes when I'm in Carmel preparing the cottage for you. I sit with her when she's having clear days. I show her photographs of Jonathan, though I never tell her they're from me. She's proud of him in her way, proud that he became successful, even though she had nothing to do with it. I gave him good genes, she told me once. That's the only gift I could give. I'm leaving you this choice, Susan, because I trust your judgment more than my own. I've been managing Elena's care from obligation and guilt, but you can approach it from compassion if you choose. The trust transfers to your control upon my death. You can continue Elena's care, redirect the funds, or end them entirely. You can tell Jonathan about her or maintain the secrecy. You can visit her or never set foot in Cypress Grove. Whatever you decide, know that I loved you fully, completely for every day of our 42 years. Elena was my past, my failure, my regret. You were my present, my success, my joy. If you can forgive me for keeping these secrets, I'll count myself blessed even in death. Forever yours. Robert. I set the letter down, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of betrayal or anger, but of understanding. Robert had carried this burden alone for 43 years. The weight of loving 2 women in completely different ways. The guilt of promises he couldn't keep. The fear that truth would shatter the family he'd fought so hard to build. And in the end, he'd trusted me with all of it. I looked around the cottage he'd prepared with such care. Every detail chosen for my comfort. Every system designed for my independence. Every decision made with my future in mind. This was love. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but deep and real and enduring despite the secrets it had to carry. I pulled out my phone and called Jonathan. "Mom?" He answered on the second ring, his voice tentative. "Is everything okay?" "I found another letter from your father," he said. "About Elena, about why he kept her a secret all these years." Silence on the other end then, and I think you should read it. Not because it excuses anything, but because it explains. Your father loved your mother, Jonathan. Maybe not the way he loved me, but he loved her enough to protect her when she couldn't protect herself. "I'd like to read it," he said quietly. "Come to Carmel this weekend," I said. "We'll visit Elena together and I'll show you the letter. It's time you knew the whole story." "Mom," his voice cracked slightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "I'm your mother," I said simply. "That's not something I know how to do." After we hung up, I sat watching the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Robert had left me wealth beyond measure, but the real inheritance wasn't the money or the property or the cars locked away in the garage. It was the choice. The freedom to decide who to be, who to help, how to use power, tempered by compassion. I was 68 years old, and I was just beginning to understand what it meant to be truly independent. Spring arrived in Carmel 6 months after Robert's death, painting the cottage garden with blooms I'd planted myself. Roses in the colors Robert had loved. Lavender along the stone pathway. Jasmine climbing the arbor leading to the small patio where I took my morning coffee. I'd settled into rhythms that felt increasingly natural. Mornings began with walks along the beach when fog didn't shroud the coast. Afternoons were dedicated to the practical matters of managing the inheritance, meeting with financial advisors, reviewing property reports, making decisions about the portfolio Robert had built. But the evenings belonged to Carmel, to this life I was building in the space Robert had prepared, but that was becoming wholly mine. Jonathan visited every other weekend now. True to his word, he'd found a therapist in Los Angeles and was doing the difficult work of understanding the patterns that had nearly destroyed him. The financial restructuring had been painful, selling the penthouse at a modest loss, settling debts, accepting the limitations of trust-managed funds. But something in him had shifted. Softened maybe, or perhaps just become more honest. Today was Saturday, which meant our weekly visit to Elena. I heard Jonathan's car pull up precisely at 10. His timekeeping had always been impeccable, one trait from Robert that had survived his years of chasing status over substance. "Morning, Mom," he called through the screen door, letting himself in with the key I'd given him last month. "I brought pastries from that bakery you like." We drove to Cypress Grove together, a ritual that had become comfortable over the months. Jonathan would update me on his therapy sessions, on the job leads he was pursuing, on the slow process of rebuilding his life with intention rather than ambition. Elena was having a good day. They came in cycles now, periods of relative clarity followed by deeper fog. Dr. Chen said to treasure the clear moments because they would become fewer as the disease progressed. We found her in the garden, tending to a small plot the facility had designated for residents who found comfort in working with soil and growing things. "Jonathan," her face lit up when she saw him. "And Susan, I was hoping you'd come today." "We brought those chocolate croissants you liked last time," Jonathan said, settling onto the bench beside her garden plot. Elena wiped soil from her hands and joined him, accepting the pastry with a smile that made her look years younger. "You spoil me." "You're my mother," he said simply. "I'm allowed." I watched them together, still marveling at how naturally this relationship had developed. Jonathan, who'd spent his adult life pursuing superficial success, had found genuine connection with a woman whose life had been defined by failure and struggle. "I brought something to show you," Elena said, reaching into the pocket of her cardigan. She pulled out a small bracelet, tarnished silver with turquoise stones. "I found this in my things. I think Robert gave it to me when we were young, before everything went wrong." Jonathan took the bracelet carefully. "It's beautiful." "I want you to have it," Elena said. "It's the only thing I have from before, from when I was someone who could have been a good mother." "You can still be a good mother," Jonathan said gently. "Right now in these moments, that counts too." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You're kinder than I deserve." "Maybe kindness isn't about deserving," he replied, and I heard Robert's wisdom in those words filtered through Jonathan's hard-won understanding. After our visit, as we drove back to the cottage, Jonathan was quiet. "What are you thinking?" I finally asked. "About forgiveness," he said. "Elena blames herself for everything she couldn't be. Dad blamed himself for not saving her. I blamed both of you for not being perfect." He paused. "I think I'm starting to understand that the inheritance wasn't really about money. It was about learning to forgive others and ourselves." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Your father would be proud of you." "I hope so." He pulled into the cottage driveway. "I have news, actually. Remember that nonprofit I was consulting with, the affordable housing developers? The ones who bought your failed project site. They offered me a full-time position, project manager for their Northern California developments. It's a fraction of what I used to make, but the trust covers basics and the work feels—" He searched for words. "It feels like building something that matters instead of just building wealth. Are you going to accept?" "Oh, I already did." He smiled, and it was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. "I start next month, which means I'll be moving to the Bay Area, close enough to visit you and Elena regularly." "I'm happy for you, Jonathan. There's something else." He reached into his jacket pocket. "The trustees sent the quarterly reports this week. They wanted your approval on something." He handed me a document. I scanned it, then looked up in surprise. "They want to sell 2 of the 3 cars from the garage. The Mercedes and the Ferrari. Keep the Aston Martin since you've been driving it. Use the proceeds to establish a foundation." He pointed to the proposed foundation name, the Robert and Elena Campbell Foundation for Families in Recovery. "The trustees recommended it based on statements you'd made about honoring both Dad's planning and Elena's struggle," Jonathan explained. "Supporting families dealing with addiction, providing resources for children whose parents are in treatment. It would be Dad's wealth doing exactly what he would have wanted, helping people like Elena rebuild their lives." I studied the proposal, my eyes misting. This is beautiful. Will you approve it? Yes, I signed without hesitation. But I have one condition. What's that? The foundation board includes you, and when you're ready, when you've proven yourself in this new work, you join me as co-trustee of the remaining estate. Jonathan's eyes widened. Mom, I'm not ready for that kind of responsibility. Maybe not today, I agreed. But your father's test wasn't about whether you were perfect. It was about whether you could grow. And you have Jonathan. You're becoming the man he hoped you'd be. He looked away, blinking rapidly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep doing the work. Keep visiting Elena. Keep building a life based on what matters rather than what impresses. I stood, pulling him into a hug. The money will be there when you're ready. For now, focus on becoming someone worthy of managing it wisely. I'll try, he promised into my shoulder. I'll keep trying. Marcus Weatherby called the following Tuesday with an unusual request. Mrs. Campbell, I apologize for the intrusion, but I've discovered something while doing the annual maintenance on the vehicles. There's a second safe in the garage, one I didn't know existed. It requires 2 keys to open one I have and one that should have been with your husband's effects. My pulse quickened. What kind of safe? Small, custom-built, hidden in the floor beneath the Ferrari. I only found it because there was a minor hydraulic leak from the lift system. He paused. Robert once mentioned to me that if anything happened to him, I should look for a second lock. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I remembered Margaret's comment months ago about Robert saying he'd left 2 keys, one for the garage, one for the truth. I'll come down tomorrow, I said. Let me search through Robert's belongings tonight. I spent the evening going through boxes I'd stored in the cottage's small attic, Robert's clothes, his books, his collection of fountain pens. In the bottom of a box containing his watches and cufflinks, I found a small key I'd never seen before attached to a tag that read simply, "For the truth." The next morning I met Marcus at the garage. He'd already moved the Ferrari aside, revealing a section of floor that looked seamless until you knew to look for the subtle outline of an access panel. Both keys turned simultaneously, Marcus explained, showing me a dual lock mechanism. Your husband was quite specific about the installation. He said only someone who'd found both keys deserved to know what was inside. We inserted our keys and turned them together. The panel lifted to reveal a small safe no larger than a shoebox. Inside was a single item, a leather-bound journal with Robert's initials embossed on the cover. I'll leave you to it, Marcus said quietly, retreating to give me privacy. I sat on the garage floor, the journal heavy in my hands, and opened to the first page. This is the story I couldn't tell you while I was alive, Susan. The full truth about Elena, about the choice I made, and about what I need you to understand before you judge me, or yourself, too harshly. The entries began in 1978, shortly after Robert had adopted Jonathan. March 15th, 1978. Today I brought my son home. 4 weeks old, 8 pounds, with eyes that will break hearts someday, just like his mother's did. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know if love is enough when I'm this terrified of failing him. But Elena was right about one thing he deserves better than what she can give him right now. Maybe better than what I can give him alone. I need to find him a real mother, someone who can love him without the weight of addiction and regret. The entries continued chronicling Robert's first year with Jonathan, the sleepless nights, the fear, the growing love for this child who hadn't been planned but who'd become the center of his world. Then June 1978, June 8th, 1978, I met someone tonight. A woman at an art gallery standing in front of a photograph of Carmel's coastline. She said it reminded her of healing, of starting over. Her name is Susan, and when I told her I had a son, she smiled and asked what he liked instead of making excuses to leave. I think I could fall in love with her. I think Jonathan could have the mother he deserves. I smiled through tears, reading Robert's early impressions of me, too generous, too kind, but written with such hope that I could feel his younger self reaching forward through time. August 20th, 1978. Susan is incredible with Jonathan. She holds him like he's precious, sings to him in that soft voice she has. Tonight she fell asleep on my couch with him on her chest, and I thought this is what family should look like. This is what I want for all of us. But I haven't told her about Elena. How do I explain that Jonathan's mother is alive but absent, that she signed him away because drugs were more powerful than maternal love? Susan asks gentle questions about Jonathan's mother, and I deflect with half-truths. I know I should tell her everything, but I'm afraid she'll see Jonathan differently if she knows his mother chose addiction over him. I'm afraid she'll leave before she loves us enough to stay. The journal documented our courtship, our engagement, our wedding, all from Robert's perspective, with the secret of Elena threading through every entry like a shadow he couldn't escape. December 2nd, 1978. We married today. Susan walked down the aisle holding Jonathan, who was 7 months old and gurgling happily. She wanted him with us, wanted him part of the ceremony. He's our son, she said. Not my son, our son. I should have told her the truth then. But looking at her face so full of joy and love, I told myself that the details didn't matter. Elena had given birth to Jonathan, but Susan was his mother in every way that counted. Why burden her with a past that was over? God, forgive me. I chose silence over honesty. And I'll carry that choice forever. I turned pages reading about our early years together. Jonathan's first words, his first steps, the life we built as a family. But interwoven with the joy were entries about Elena. April 17th, 1982. Elena called from a hospital in Sacramento. Overdose nearly fatal. She wanted me to know she was sorry that she thinks about Jonathan every day. I sent money anonymously through the hospital's patient fund. I couldn't help myself. Susan was making dinner when I took the call. I told her it was work. Another lie to add to the collection. September 3rd, 1985. Elena is clean again, working at a diner in Fresno. She sent a letter asking if I could share a photo of Jonathan. I know I don't deserve it, she wrote, but I wonder if he's happy. I wonder if he looks like me. I sent her a school photo from last year. Jonathan, age 7, grinning with a missing front tooth. I didn't include a return address. I'm building a wall of deception brick by brick. Each small lie another layer between Susan and the full truth. But stopping now would mean admitting to all the lies that came before. So I keep adding bricks. The entries grew darker as the years passed, tracking Elena's cycles of recovery and relapse alongside our family life. Robert's guilt was palpable on every page. November 12, 1995, Jonathan asked about his real mother today. He's 16, starting to question where he came from. Susan handled it beautifully, telling him that biology matters less than love, that she's his mother in every way that counts. But I saw the hurt in her eyes when he said real mother, as if Susan's 17 years of loving him somehow weren't real. I wanted to tell him the truth, then that his real mother is an addict who couldn't keep him, who chose drugs over her own child. That Susan, the woman who's raised him with patience and grace, is more his mother than Elena ever was or could be. But I stayed silent, still protecting Elena's secret, still maintaining the lie. Then 2018, March 7, 2018, Elena called with different news. Early onset Alzheimer's, diagnosed at 67. She's living on the streets in Carmel, of all places she returned to where we began. She doesn't remember much, but she remembers having a son she gave away. She remembers regret. I can't leave her there. Whatever our history, whatever she's done, she's Jonathan's mother. She deserves dignity in her decline. I found Cypress Grove arranged for her admission. Anonymous trust to cover costs. Susan will never know she has enough to carry without this burden. But I'm 67 too. My own health is failing, though I haven't told Susan the extent of it. Time is running out to make things right, to prepare for a future I won't be part of. The journal entries grew shorter as Robert's illness progressed, but they gained intensity. August 15th, 2021, I've begun the inheritance plan. Splitting assets in a way that will seem cruel, but is actually protective. Jonathan has become someone who values all the wrong things, appearance over substance, status over character. He dismisses Susan's opinion, speaks to her as if she's foolish. I've heard him. If I leave them everything jointly, he'll control it all within a year. He'll put Susan in one of those communities where inconvenient elderly parents go to be forgotten. She'll live on his charity, dependent on his goodwill, which grows thinner every year. So I'm building her a fortress disguised as abandonment. Wealth hidden where Jonathan won't think to look. Independence he can't touch. And a choice about Elena that's hers to make, not mine to force. October 3rd, 2022. The cars are in place. The cottage is ready. The trusts are established. Everything Susan needs for a comfortable life hidden in plain sight. But the hardest part is knowing I'm leaving her with secrets. She'll have to discover Elena on her own, make decisions about Jonathan without my guidance. I'm asking her to be wiser than I was, stronger than I could be. I hope she can forgive me. I hope she understands that every secret was kept to protect someone Elena's dignity, Jonathan's innocence, Susan's peace. But secrets are still lies, and I've told too many. The final entry was dated February 8, 2024, 1 week before Robert died. February 8, 2024. My final entry, though, I don't know if it's truly final or if I'll find strength to write again. I visited Elena today. She was having a clear moment sitting in the Cypress Grove garden. She asked about the man in the photographs, Jonathan, though she doesn't know his name. He looks happy, she said. His parents must love him very much. They do, I told her. They've given him everything they could. She smiled, then peaceful in a way I'd never seen. Then I didn't ruin everything. I gave him life and someone else gave him love. That's enough. Is it enough, though? Is any of this enough to balance the deception, the half-truths, the careful construction of a life built partly on lies I won't know? I'll be gone before the truth comes out, before Susan opens the garage and finds the cars and the letter, and the choice I'm forcing on her. But I believe in her. I believe she's stronger and wiser than I ever was. I believe she'll take these broken pieces, Elena's addiction, Jonathan's arrogance, my cowardice, and somehow make something beautiful from them. That's not faith in God or destiny. It's faith in Susan, in the woman who saw healing in a photograph of the coast, in the mother who loved a child who wasn't hers, in the wife who made me better than I deserved to be. If you're reading this, my love, it means you found the second key. It means you've discovered Elena confronted Jonathan, made hard choices about inheritance and forgiveness. I hope I made the right decision, giving you this burden. I hope you can forgive me for it. And I hope you know that every choice I made, good or bad, wise or foolish, came from love. Love for you, love for Jonathan. Even love for Elena, broken as she was. The inheritance isn't really about money, Susan. It's about what you choose to do with power, with knowledge, with the freedom to decide who you want to be. I've given you that freedom. Use it wisely. Use it with compassion. Use it to become the person you were always meant to be, but that our marriage perhaps prevented you from becoming because you were too busy taking care of everyone else. This is your time, your chance, your inheritance. Make it count. All my love across whatever distance separates us now. Robert, I closed the journal, tears streaming freely, and sat in the quiet garage surrounded by millions of dollars in assets that suddenly mattered less than the words I'd just read. Robert hadn't been perfect. He'd kept too many secrets, told too many lies of a mission, carried burdens he should have shared. But he'd loved us. All of us, me, Jonathan, even Elena, in complicated, imperfect ways that had done both harm and good. And in the end, he'd trusted me with the truth and the choice. That was his real inheritance. Not money or property, but faith in my judgment, in my capacity to handle complexity and choose wisely. I pulled out my phone and called Jonathan. Mom, what's wrong? You sound... I found another journal from your father, I said. The full story, everything he never said out loud. Can you come to Carmel this weekend? I think we need to read it together. Saturday arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes the California coast look like something from a dream. Jonathan arrived at the cottage at 9, and I handed him the journal without preamble. Read it, I said. All of it. Take your time. I'll make us lunch while you do. I left him in the study and went to the kitchen, giving him privacy to absorb Robert's words. I heard him laugh once, softly at something his father had written. Heard him cry quietly later, the kind of tears that come from understanding arriving too late. 3 hours passed before he emerged, the journal clutched in his hands like something precious and painful. He knew, Jonathan said, his voice rough. He knew what I was becoming and tried to stop it anyway, not with lectures or arguments, but with a test I didn't even know I was taking. And you passed, I said gently. Not immediately, not perfectly, but you passed by choosing to change. Did I? He sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Or am I just performing better because the incentive structure changed? It was the kind of honest, uncomfortable question his therapist had probably taught him to ask. Does it matter? I countered. If you become a better person because you're trying to earn back trust, are you less better than if you'd changed spontaneously? He considered this. Dad thought it mattered. He thought real change comes from internal recognition, not external pressure. Your father thought a lot of things, I said, bringing tea to the table. But he also spent 40 years keeping secrets because he was afraid of truth. Maybe he wasn't the best judge of how change happens. Jonathan's eyes widened slightly. That's the first time I've ever heard you criticize him. I loved your father completely, I said. But love doesn't require blind acceptance of flaws. Robert was brilliant and kind and generous. He was also a coward about some things, a control freak about others, and too convinced that he alone could fix everything. And you forgive him anyway? I forgive him because he was human, because he tried even when he failed, because in the end he trusted me with the truth even though it was terrifying for him. I reached across the table for Jonathan's hand. Same reason I'm giving you another chance. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the journal between us like a bridge across the gap that had divided us for so long. I have a question, Jonathan said finally. The foundation we're establishing, the Robert and Elena Campbell Foundation, should we tell Elena about it? That her name will be on something that helps people like her. I thought about Elena in her garden at Cypress Grove, tending plants and trying to hold on to moments of clarity before they slipped away. Let's ask her, I said. Today. Right now. We'll drive there together, and we'll let her decide if she wants that legacy. 20 minutes later, we were in my car, not the practical Camry anymore, but the Aston Martin from the garage. I'd been driving it occasionally over the past months, feeling Robert's presence in the purr of the engine and the smooth handling he would have loved. Jonathan noticed. You kept Dad's favorite. It reminds me of him, I admitted. The good parts. The part that loved beautiful things and took joy in small perfections. We drove with the windows down, the coastal air whipping through the car. Jonathan was quiet, watching the ocean scroll past until finally he spoke. I need to tell you something. About the penthouse. I glanced over, concerned by his tone. When I was gutting it after you left, I found letters, hidden in Dad's study wall behind a panel. Letters he'd written to Elena over the years but never sent. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did they say? That he was sorry, that he hoped she was okay, that he was taking care of Jonathan and wanted her to know he was happy. Jonathan's voice was thick with emotion. That he forgave her for not being able to be a mother and hoped she could forgive herself. Why didn't you tell me about these letters before? Because I was angry. I thought they proved Dad had been in love with her all along, that everything with you was second best. He paused. But reading the journal, I understand now. He loved you both in completely different ways. Elena was his past, his failure, his regret. You were his present, his success, his joy. That's surprisingly mature of you. He laughed, but it was gentle, not bitter. 6 months of therapy will do that. Plus, I've been visiting Elena, getting to know her. She talks about Mom about you sometimes. Says Robert told her once that he'd married the kindest woman in the world, and she was glad. I had to pull over, vision blurring with tears. We were on a scenic overlook, the Pacific stretching endlessly before us. She said that, on one of her clear days, she said, I gave Robert a son, but you gave him a family. That's the better gift. We sat there, the Aston Martin idling, while I wept for Robert and Elena and the complicated tangle of love and loss that had brought us all to this moment. Finally, I wiped my eyes and looked at Jonathan. Your father left us both a test, you know. Mine was about power, how I'd use wealth and control when I finally had them. Yours was about character, who you'd be when appearances were stripped away. And Elena's test, Jonathan asked, was about forgiveness. Whether she could forgive herself enough to accept help, accept connection, accept that her life still had value despite everything she'd lost. I put the car back in gear and continued toward Cypress Grove. Let's go help her pass it. Elena was in her usual spot in the garden, tending to tomato plants that were just beginning to set fruit. She looked up when we approached, and I saw the flicker of recognition, not just of our faces, but of what we represented. Family. You brought the fast car today, she said, smiling at the Aston Martin visible through the garden fence. Robert would have loved that. He did, I said, settling onto the bench beside her plot. It was his. Everything beautiful was his, Elena said softly, then focusing on Jonathan, including you, mijijo. Jonathan knelt beside the tomato plants. We came to ask you something important. May we? Elena set down her trowel, giving him her full attention. On her clear days, she was remarkably present, as if her mind gathered all its remaining power to fight the fog. We're establishing a foundation, I explained, to help families affected by addiction, to provide resources for children whose parents are in treatment, to support recovery programs and housing assistance. That sounds wonderful, Elena said. We want to name it the Robert and Elena Campbell Foundation, Jonathan continued. If that's okay with you, your name alongside Dad's helping people who struggled the way you did. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling over. My name? But I'm not someone people should remember. I'm just an old addict who couldn't take care of her own child. You're my mother, Jonathan said firmly. And you're a survivor. You got clean, you stayed clean for 30 years. You faced demons that would have destroyed most people. That's worth remembering. That's worth honoring. But I failed. You fell, I interrupted gently. There's a difference. Failing means not trying. You tried Elena. You tried so hard that Robert spent 40 years making sure you'd have dignity and care when you couldn't provide it for yourself. She looked between us, this woman who'd given birth to my son and loved my husband before I knew him. This woman whose life had been so different from mine, but whose choices had shaped my family completely. Robert really loved you, she said to me. He told me once near the end. He said, Susan is the best person I know. She makes me want to be better. That's true love, not the crazy passion we had. True love. He loved you too, I said. Differently, but real. He wanted you to be okay even when he couldn't save you from yourself. Elena nodded slowly. Then yes, use my name. If it can help even one mother stay with her child when the drugs call to her, if it can help one child understand their parent's addiction isn't their fault, then yes. That would mean my life mattered for something. Jonathan took her hand. Your life matters because you're here. Because you're trying. Because you gave me the gift of life, even if someone else gave me the gift of raising. We sat together in the garden while Elena wept for what she'd lost, for what she'd been given, for the strange grace of this ending she'd never expected. Dr. Chen approached quietly, checking on her patient. Elena waved her over. These are my people, she told the doctor, gesturing to us. My son and his mother. We're starting a foundation together. Dr. Chen smiled. That's wonderful, Elena. You should be proud. After our visit, as Jonathan and I walked back to the car, he stopped me with a hand on my arm. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For being the kind of person who could sit in a garden with your husband's ex-lover and plan a foundation in her name. For being bigger than jealousy or resentment or any of the things you'd be justified in feeling. He paused. For showing me what grace actually looks like. I pulled him into a hug. Your father gave me that gift by trusting me with the choice. Now I'm giving it to you, the choice to be someone who builds instead of destroys, who forgives instead of condemns. I'm trying, he promised. Every day I'm trying. We drove back to Carmel with the sun setting behind us, painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. The Aston Martin handled the curves of Highway 1 with elegant precision, just as Robert would have loved. There's one more thing, I said as we pulled into the cottage driveway. I've made a decision about the estate. Jonathan's expression became carefully neutral. Oh, the trustees and I have agreed. Effective immediately, you're being added as co-trustee with provisional powers. In 2 years, if you continue your current trajectory, those powers become full. In 5 years, we transition to equal partnership in managing the foundation and all estate assets. He stared at me. Mom, I don't know if I'm ready. You're not, I agreed. But you will be. Your father's test wasn't about being perfect from the start. It was about proving you could grow. And you have, Jonathan. You're becoming someone I trust with this responsibility. What if I fail? What if I make mistakes? Then you'll learn from them just like I'm learning. I smiled. Neither of us has to be perfect, Jonathan. We just have to be honest and willing to keep trying. 1 year after Robert's death, I stood in the cottage garden with Margaret surveying the roses that had bloomed more beautifully than I dared hope. You've made this place your own, Margaret observed. Robert gave you the foundation, but you built something new on it. She was right. The cottage had been Robert's gift, but I'd added my touches: a reading nook in the bedroom, a small greenhouse for winter seedlings, a bench placed exactly where the sunset could be seen through the cypress trees. My phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan Foundation. Paperwork is final. Board meeting next week. Elena's having a clear day if you want to visit. I smiled. Jonathan had thrown himself into the foundation work with the same intensity he'd once applied to chasing profits, but now channeled toward purpose. He and his new partner, an architect named Sarah, who worked on affordable housing design, were planning to marry in the fall. Elena would be there if her health allowed. We'd become something like friends over the past year, bonded by our shared love for Robert and Jonathan, despite the complicated history that connected us. "You look happy," Margaret said. I considered this. Was I happy Robert was still gone? Jonathan still had hard days. Elena was slowly disappearing into the fog of disease. The inheritance came with responsibilities I hadn't wanted and choices that kept me awake at night. But yes, despite everything, I was happy. "I'm free," I said finally. Maybe that's better than happy. Free to choose who to help, how to spend my time, what kind of person to be. Robert gave me that freedom, even if he did it in the most complicated way possible. That afternoon, I drove to the garage, the place where this journey had begun, with a rusty key and crushing disappointment. Marcus Weatherby met me there. He'd become a friend over the past year, helping me understand the car market and make wise decisions about the collection. "Ready?" he asked, gesturing to the Aston Martin. "Ready." We were taking it to a car show in Monterey, one of the premier vintage car events in the world. Not to sell it, but to share it, to let people see what Robert had preserved with such care. As I drove up the coast, the car drawing admiring looks from other drivers, I thought about inheritance. About what we're given and what we earn. About the difference between wealth and worth. Robert had left me millions in assets, yes. But the real inheritance was the choice he'd given me to be someone who used power wisely, who forgave imperfections, who built something meaningful from broken pieces. I'd chosen to share the wealth with Jonathan after he'd proven himself worthy. I'd chosen to honor Elena's struggle by making it visible, valuable, a source of help for others. I'd chosen to keep the Aston Martin and use it not as a showpiece, but as a living reminder that beautiful things exist to be experienced, not hidden away. These choices had made me wealthy in ways that had nothing to do with bank account balances. At the car show, people crowded around the Aston Martin asking questions about its history and provenance. I told them about Robert, about his quiet passion for preserving beautiful things, about how he'd built this collection as an act of love for the wife he'd be leaving behind. An elderly man approached as the crowd thinned. "Your husband had excellent taste. These early DB5s are extraordinary investments." "They were never about investment," I said. "They were about love." He looked puzzled, so I explained Robert knew I'd need something tangible after he was gone. Not just money, which can feel abstract, but something I could touch and see. Something that proved he'd thought about my future, even when he couldn't be part of it. The man nodded slowly. "That's the best inheritance, knowing you were loved enough that someone planned for you." After he left, I sat in the Aston Martin's driver's seat, hands on the wheel Robert had once specified, down to the leather stitching, and finally allowed myself to say goodbye. "You did it, Robert," I whispered. "You protected me. You tested Jonathan and gave him room to grow. You cared for Elena even when she couldn't care for herself. You weren't perfect, but you were good enough." I felt lighter then, as if I'd been carrying his ghost alongside all his gifts and had finally given him permission to rest. The Foundation's third annual gala was held at a reclaimed warehouse in Oakland, the kind of space that embodied our mission, taking what looked broken and making it beautiful and useful again. I stood near the entrance greeting guests wearing the sapphire and diamond eternity band Robert had commissioned but never lived to give me. Jonathan had found it among Robert's effects and presented it to me on the Foundation's first anniversary. Beside my simple wedding band, it caught the light with every movement, a reminder of promises kept and new beginnings earned. "Susan D." Elena approached Jonathan's arm, moving slowly but steadily. At 75, with Alzheimer's progressing, she had fewer clear days now. But today was one of them, and she'd insisted on attending. "You look beautiful," I said, embracing her carefully. She wore a dress Sarah had helped her choose, silver blue, like the ocean, with the turquoise bracelet Jonathan had returned to her on her wrist. "I wanted to see it," Elena said, looking around at the warehouse transformed into elegance. "The Foundation that has my name. Robert would be proud." "He would be proud of you," I corrected, "for letting us honor your struggle by helping others." Jonathan appeared with Sarah, their 6-month-old daughter, nestled in Sarah's arms. They'd named her Elena Susan Campbell, a name carrying 3 generations of complicated love. "She's awake," Sarah said, offering the baby to me. "And I think she wants her grandmother." I took my granddaughter, this child who carried Elena's name and my own, and felt the circle complete itself. Robert's legacy wasn't just money or property. It was this moment of three women from different generations connected by a man's imperfect love and a family's choice to forgive and keep building. The evening unfolded in speeches and stories. People whose lives had been touched by the Foundation's work stood to share their journeys from addiction to recovery, from homelessness to housing, from shame to hope. Jonathan spoke last, his voice steady and sure. My father left me an inheritance I didn't understand at first. It looked like rejection, like punishment for not being the son he wanted. But it was actually a gift, the gift of a mirror that showed me who I'd become, and a map showing who I could be instead. This foundation exists because my father loved three women enough to be imperfect for them. He loved my birth mother, Elena, enough to support her, even when she couldn't be part of my life. He loved my mother, Susan, enough to give her freedom and choice when he could no longer be there to protect her. And he loved my partner, Sarah, and our daughter enough to ensure I'd become the kind of man worthy of their love. The real inheritance wasn't money. It was the example of failing and trying again. It was the courage to face hard truths. It was the wisdom to know that love sometimes means letting people find their own way, even when you desperately want to control the outcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for supporting this work. And thank you to the three remarkable women who taught me what inheritance really means, not what you're given, but what you choose to carry forward. As the applause faded, I looked around the room at the life we'd built from Robert's complicated legacy. At Jonathan, transformed from entitled executive to passionate advocate. At Elena, given dignity in her declining years and a legacy beyond her struggles. At Sarah and baby Elena, representing a future built on lessons learned from the past. The garage key that had once seemed like an insult had unlocked more than vintage cars. It had unlocked truth, choice, freedom, and the possibility of becoming someone new. I was 71 years old, and I'd never felt more powerful or more at peace. Robert had left me an inheritance, yes, but I'd earned it by choosing wisely, forgiving generously, and building something that would outlast all of us. As the gala wound down and I held my sleeping granddaughter, I thought about the photograph that had started my journey toward truth, Robert young and laughing with Elena on a Carmel beach. I'd framed it alongside our wedding photo in the cottage study, not to honor betrayal, but to honor complexity, to acknowledge that people can love imperfectly and still love truly, that secrets can be both harmful and protective, that inheritance is less about what we receive and more about what we do with the receiving. The garage door had opened on my 68th birthday, revealing cars and money and choices I'd never expected. But the real door, the one that mattered, was the one I'd opened in myself. The door to strength, to independence, to becoming someone who could hold power without abusing it, who could forgive without forgetting, who could build bridges instead of walls. That was Robert's final gift. Not wealth, but the chance to discover my own worth. And I'd taken that chance and made it count. The End Bound. Author's note. This story is about the inheritance we create for others through our choices and the inheritance we claim for ourselves through courage. May we all be blessed with people who love us imperfectly but truly, and may we have the wisdom to recognize their gifts even when wrapped in difficulty. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more stories about love loss and the complicated beauty of family. Your support means everything.